Great, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Brooke Heffright. I am the director of CINA. We are pleased to welcome you to our kickoff briefing today for the project titled Using Deep Learning to Extract and Analyze Dynamic Knowledge Graphs, Criminal Networks from Publicly Available Text. And this will be presented by the research team led by the principal investigator, Dr. Carlotta Domeniconi, associate professor in the Department of Computer Science here at George Mason University. And her co-PI is Dr. Guadalupe Correa Cabrera, who is professor in Schar School of Policy and Government, and Dr. Sean Luke, professor in the Department of Computer Science at George Mason. So for folks who are new to CINA, we always get a couple on every call. CINA is a DHS Center of Excellence hosted by George Mason University. So CINA stands for Criminal Investigations and Network Analysis, and our mandate is to support the Homeland Security enterprise in its mission to counter transnational criminal organizations. DHS Centers of Excellence are managed by the DHS Science and Technology Directorate's Office of University Programs, with the goal of conducting groundbreaking research resulting in rigorous, objective knowledge products and timely solutions for DHS components. Concretely, what it means to be supported under a cooperative agreement is that every year, George Mason receives funding from the Office of University Programs to support research by scholars at institutions all over the country, and in some cases, allied or partner countries. That includes the research that you'll hear about today, which happens to be carried out here at George Mason. The methods in CINA's research portfolio are criminal network analysis, dynamic patterns of criminal activity, forensics, both cyber forensics and traditional forensics, and criminal investigative processes. So all of our research fits into one of these four areas. And today's research particularly addresses criminal network analysis. In addition to supporting research, CINA's mandate includes conducting educational workforce activities, such as 3 summer research teams from minority-serving institutions that Mason faculty hosted this summer. And one of them was just featured in local news here in the DMV, WTOP, for a project that took advantage of Mason's body farm to study decomposition in real time. And if you're interested in that research, you can take a look at our website. We'll have those articles up, or you can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up at our website. That's cina.gmu.edu. It's on the screen right now. CINA with a C, and express your interest, and we'd be happy to send you our newsletter when it comes out quarterly, and also send you occasional notifications about events. We also at CINA, under our workforce development mandate, support interns. We had 2 interns at the Cybercrime Center, DHS Cybercrime Center this summer, and we are shortly going to put out another announcement for summer interns next year. So if you are in a DHS component and you are interested in attracting interns supported by DHS S&T to work on mission-related projects this summer, we would be happy to facilitate. Please just let us know. CINA also hosts events and conducts outreach. We have an ongoing distinguished speaker series aimed mostly at DHS and DHS components. Recent speakers include Mike Newman from the Queensland Police, that was jointly with Mason's Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy, and Donna Turner, a former Bank of America executive who spoke on the changing dynamics of global financial crime, and that was jointly with the Noble, an NGO based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. If you missed the talks, the video is always available on CINA's website or on our YouTube channel. And we'll be scheduling further distinguished speakers for this program year shortly. And again, you can get announcements about those speakers at cina.gmu.edu. CINA is supported by a DHS board of directors who help us to ensure that our research remains relevant and to help identify champions and funding for transition. Some of them are on the call. I'd like in particular to thank James Sung from INA for joining us. We're really eager to share this research with him, as well as Amy Leffler from S&T. And we're very hopeful that this sparks interest in your components and leads to potential transmission and application. So with that, I'll just mention that CINA, in addition to our cooperative agreement, we also have a basic ordering agreement, recently renewed for 5 years, which we can use to facilitate transfer, licensing, and commercialization of research. So if you're interested, our transition and impact manager, Stephen Self, can help set you up. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to present using deep learning to extract and analyze dynamic knowledge graphs of criminal networks from publicly available text, presented by Dr. Carlotta Domeniconi, Dr. Guadalupe Correa Cabrera, and Dr. Sean Luke. Carlotta, please take it away.
Yes, I'm gonna pull up my slides. All right.
Okay, we can see those. Thanks.
Okay. All right, you guys can see it, right? Okay, good. So thanks, Brooke, for the introduction. And we have here today our entire team, including the 2 PhD students who are working on this project, Deepak Meher from Computer Science and Shabib Raihan from the Shar School of Policy and Government. So I wanted to give you a very brief introduction on our expertise, on the team expertise. We are an interdisciplinary team, and our work spans different disciplines, including computer science and social sciences. I am a professor in computer science, and my work is on machine learning and deep learning. I've been working in these areas for over 20 years. And more recently, I've been working on deep learning models, and in particular, network data analysis and community and anomaly detection in such graph data. Professor Correa Cabrera, she's an expert on immigration and migration, human smuggling, and social science. Professor Sean Luke, he's also faculty in computer science, working on multi-agent systems and learning, agent-based and discrete event simulation and stochastic optimization. So what are the goals? Briefly, an overview of this presentation. We're going to talk about the goals of our research in this project, an overview, a brief introduction on the background and motivation of our work. We will give an overall idea behind our technical approach, our plan for evaluation of the results, and how our findings can be applied in practice. And then we're going to open the floor for the Q&A. So in our research, we have mainly 2 goals. Our first goal is to automate the process of constructing criminal networks, in our particular case, human smuggling networks. The second goal is to analyze and mine these networks to discover behavioral patterns involved in such networks, and especially dynamic patterns. So we want to study how the behavior of these networks may change and adapt over time, with the long-term goal is to help counteracting these networks. So we want to answer a few specific questions. We want to analyze and study who are the actors involved in human smuggling networks, which roles do they undertake, how these roles may evolve over time, how these actors organize themselves in groups, and how these groups may interact with one another, and how these interactions may change and adapt over time, especially in response to changes in policy, enforcement, and societal makeup. So a little bit of background why these questions are important. So in recent years, the US-bound migration has gone great and profound changes. And at the same time, they make up a number of people who have been traveling and entering the US border illegally has changed dramatically. And human smuggling networks and operations in general have a greater impact in this phenomenon, especially since they have developed from earlier on being small family organizations into large organized networks, which act as very complex systems and may also interface with corrupt officials as well as transnational organized crime. So the discovery and analysis of these networks, of human smuggling networks, and their behavioral patterns will enable and help us in a number of aspects, including understanding current migration trends, achieving novel insight into the dynamics of irregular migrations, understanding how human smuggling operations respond and adapt in changes to policy enforcement makeup, and also developing policies and strategies to counteract human smuggling and eventually preventing migrant abuses and exploitation. So we have two major tasks to tackle throughout our work, our research. The first one will be the construction of the knowledge graphs representing our criminal networks. And the second task will be mining such graphs and networks to discover patterns. So in order to perform the first task, we will leverage deep learning methodologies, in particular large language models, and especially their capability of processing very large amount of text, and also to reach very deep understanding of the complex structures and relationship within text corpora. Once we have the resulting graphs, we want to mine them, apply and develop data mining and machine learning techniques as necessary to discover interesting patterns. So the patterns we anticipate discovering are who are the actors involved in such networks, which roles do they undertake, how do they organize themselves in groups or communities, how these communities interact with one another, and how this behavior may actually change over time. We will also model the dynamics, the dynamics of the behavior of such entities. And in doing so, we will be able to also predict events and potentially unexpected events that may be indicative of a structural change in these networks. So here is a picture summarizing our overall approach. The input to our system is a collection of documents describing public law cases. And they will be the input to our large language model. Specifically, we will be leveraging a large language model called GraphRag. This is a large, essentially large and deep neural network, which has been pre-trained on very, very, very large amount of text data. So this model achieves a very deep understanding of the structures in the data, and so they're capable of extracting entities and relationships from the text, as well as providing summaries and explanations for those findings, for the entities and relationships they have extracted from the text. Now, these models are trained on specialized tasks. So in order for them to be able to extract the entities we are particularly interested in our specific domain of human smuggling, we need to fine-tune them in order to tell basically the model to prioritize certain entities and certain relationships we are particularly interested in. So this process can be done via a method called prompt engineering, through which we can provide general guidance to the model and examples of the kind of things we are interested in discovering. And this process is quite efficient because that does not require the complete retrain of the large language model. The output of this process is our knowledge graph. And so we anticipate performing a manual analysis of this graph by using the domain expertise of the team. So we will validate the graph in terms of potential inconsistencies, potential incompleteness, and whether it is accurate or not. And again, we will leverage domain knowledge. So the result of this validation process is further feedback that we will be using to further tune our prompts, our input to the large language model. And we anticipate this process to be an iterative process until we converge and we obtain a knowledge graph that is accurate and as complete as possible. Once this phase is completed, we're going to start the second part, which is mining the resulting knowledge graphs. This is where we apply and develop machine learning techniques to extract patterns and behavioral patterns. So things we anticipate discovering is the various groups and communities present in these graphs, which roles the various actors play within the groups and across groups, and potentially, and how these groups also overlap and interact with one another, because we will be able to actually detect overlapping communities. And we have evidence that the communities do overlap. Further analysis we will be doing concern how to study the dynamic of these groups. So we will be modeling how these communities or groups change over time, how do they evolve over time. And this modeling will also enable us to do event prediction, as well as potential anomalous event detection. So what are the good features, the characteristics of our system? Our framework integrates domain knowledge and automated machine learning throughout the process and from the start. And we view this approach as fundamental, as paramount, in order to obtain models which are accurate. The extraction of entities and relationships enables us to capture both the heterogeneous nature of these networks, because they involve different actors and different kinds of relationships, as well as the dynamic of these networks. We will also be able to analyze the resulting graphs, which can be large and complex, with respect to certain dimensions. For example, we can analyze migration trends with respect to locations of origin and destination. One important feature of our system is transparency and explainability. Our systems actually associates factual statements and explanations to the found and discovered entities and relationships. This means that the findings can be explained, and we can also refer to the original source to verify also the accuracy of the findings. So how do we plan to evaluate the outputs and the findings? As I mentioned earlier, in order to evaluate the quality of the discovered knowledge graphs, we will use domain expertise. So we will analyze the output of the large language model across different evaluation criteria, which will include accuracy, completeness, relevance, and consistency. In order to facilitate this process, we can also project the data across certain dimensions. For example, a place of origin and place of destinations of the migration dynamic, and look for accuracies, completeness, and potential discrepancies or inconsistencies. The feedback from this process will again, will be fed back to the model that can be adapted and refined. To evaluate the graph mining process, we can again leverage our domain expertise in order to evaluate the found groups and potential anomalous events. To analyze the dynamics, the dynamical modeling, we can actually use historical data by performing random splits in history and use whatever comes before the split for training and validation, and whatever comes later as for testing the accuracy of our predictions. So how can our findings and discovery be applied in practice? We see a number of possible applications. Our findings can help developing policies and strategies to dismantle migrant smuggling networks, and therefore eventually to counteract them. It can be useful for developing policies and strategies to prevent migrant abuses and exploitation. Also, although our application scenario for this project is human smuggling, our methodology can be applied to a number of criminal networks, including drug trafficking, trafficking in persons, arms smuggling, and money laundering. So we anticipate focusing during the first year of this project on the discovering, on automating the process of discovering knowledge graphs. And we will be focusing the second year on actually mining and discovering patterns from the graphs. And for the next milestone, we will be presenting the process for extracting entities and relationships from text, from our documents, along with the semi-annual progress report. With that, I'm opening. So thanks for listening, and I'm opening the floor for questions and for possible feedback.
Carlotta, thank you very much. We're really excited about this project. I really love how it's coming together in this presentation. So we would like to hear from the audience with feedback and questions. We are a pretty small group at 17, so you can feel free to raise your hand, or you can put your question in the chat, and we'll read it out for Carlotta and the team.
There is a raised hand.
Yep, Amy Leffler, please. Amy, we don't hear you if you're speaking. Okay. Amy, I see that. Let me allow Mike. Maybe, how about that? Then you might have to unmute.
Perfect. Thank you, Brooke.
There we go.
You're the wizard behind Teams. Thank you. Carlotta, this was a really exciting presentation. I think there's a lot of applicability across the CTOC frontier. My thoughts got jumbled as I was trying to figure out the unmute. Oh, I have thoughts on terms of policy points of contact, because that would also be great stakeholders in this, because one area that we've been discussing a lot is the irregular use of legal migration patterns and the impact, or sort of the needed partnership with our allied nations, right? That we are all dealing with legal points of entry, or sort of legal routes that at one point will then get exploited, and how traffickers, or how smugglers are utilizing these, not only how they're utilizing the routes and adapting them, but also how they are advertising to potential individuals who may or may not know what they're doing is actually illegal. they may, there's argument there of, I think there are definitely some people who know that they are going to be doing something illegal at one point, but at a certain point in the route, they might not have realized that. So I think there's a lot to unpack and uncover, but as you are going through, something that I was thinking about as well is, and I believe you had this in sort of one of your first slides, is the actual organizational structure of these groups and how they are using mediators or social media or reaching people. I think there's a lot of nuance there that could be helpful in the interdiction phase and how we investigate this as well. So I can get in contact with Elizabeth for future conversations, especially with the policy folks who handle this.
This is great, because one of my questions or feedback I had for you guys is if you had suggestions, right, for additional stakeholders, DHS that might be interested. So that's awesome. Yes. So with respect to analyzing the intersection or connections among these organizational groups, we will be able to do that, as long, obviously, as that information is in the text, in the text data we feed the model. But if it is there, and even if it is hidden, we should be able to pull it out. Now, I'm sure Guadalupe has a lot to add to this. The question on how these smugglers advertise the routes, that will be very interesting, right? Information to gather through social media. Whether we will be able to do that within the scope of this project, I am not sure, but that's a very interesting question. Yes.
Well, it also goes back to sort of some of your on slide 11 of like not only dismantling the networks, but the awareness raising for individuals, for migrants themselves, right? Of how nefarious certain groups might be, or what to look out for, or questions to ask, like just sort of thinking of like, we're a law enforcement agency, and so we're thinking of like the law enforcement perspective, but then for the potential victims as well, of how we're sort of creating this dynamic. But I think the Five Eye nations, the allied nations, would also be really interested in this, because it is just such it's a boundless crime, right? Or a borderless crime. It's just flowing from everywhere.
Yeah.
But thank you. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Carlotta. Thanks, Amy. James was next. James Sung from INA. And James, looks like you are allowed to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Actually, I think I might. Hold on a second. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, it's fine. We hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I seem to be getting a bit of an echo here, but maybe I'll just take off my headphones. If you don't hear an echo, I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. I really enjoyed your presentation, and looking forward to participating in this project. I've got a couple questions for you. I don't know if maybe I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but I think they're a little bit maybe down to the practicality of it. Just wondering which LLM that you were thinking about using, and which maybe like which graph database, if you're using a graph database.
So right now we have set up our framework, and we are planning to. Right now we are using Llama 3, which is an open source model for the underlying LLM.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's locally deployed, right? So we will not rely on connection on the cloud or external connections, which also avoids potential leakage of data. So everything will be local, although we are using publicly available data effectively. So that's not even an issue, but everything will be run locally on servers, George Mason. So right now we are using Llama 3 as the underlying LLMs for GraphRag.
Okay. Are you using a graph database at all?
So we are using the open source Microsoft. The GraphRag has been developed by Microsoft. So there is no specific database. So they create a structure. So it's an index structure that then refers back to the source data that we we feed to the system. But,
okay, got it. Sounds good. Okay, my second question: are you focusing on a particular group? Do you have like a particular group in mind that you're going to be focused on, or is that something that you might look to us to help you decide like which group to look at?
You mean like a group in terms of illegal group or specific?
Right, like Spring Network or transnational organized criminal group.
So Guadalupe, would you like to take this question?
Sure. Sure. Well, the networks that we would like to, to display or to visualize incorporate, of course, the connection. I mean, these networks are part of a system where human smuggling is not just, it's not the only, and the entities connected to human smuggling networks are not the only ones that form part of the system. So in our ecosystem, we also incorporate the presence of other criminal networks, such as drug trafficking networks that connect at some points of the routes, particularly at the border, or some criminal networks that are military in its form, that are connected to drug trafficking to some extent, but they are kind of like control territories and ask for fees to the smugglers. And those networks are also connected with other criminal networks, such as kidnapping networks that are organized crime. In Mexico, for example. And that is included sometimes in the cases that we are analyzing, or in the media sources or stories that we are also trying to analyze. There is a dynamic. These networks are adapting too fast, that connecting more and more agents that are transnational in nature because of the presence of people from all over the world. So this is becoming extremely complex, and I'm not sure how we're going to capture these, but definitely we are considering in our models, in our system, all these different forms of criminal networks that connect with smugglers, with the smuggling entities. Is that what you were asking about?
Yeah, kind of. I was just kind of wondering like how you were going to, I guess, narrow down the, the universe of criminal networks that you were looking at. Like, were you going to look at just like a particular group, or is it just, networks in Mexico, Central America, South America, or people that come to the Southwest border, or is it just everything?
US-bound migration. So the cases that we're focusing on are smuggling cases, but incorporate actors that operate everywhere in the world, because US-bound migration now is extremely complex and is attracting smugglers and people from all over the globe. So this is incorporated into the news stories that we're using to complement the legal cases. And in the legal cases, we are identifying the different actors, their origin, the destination, the nationalities, and the cases incorporate that information. We just need to make sense of those, and we're starting to write our models in those terms, right? How we're going to do that, what is there? A person arriving, let's say, from Russia is making use of a smuggler that starts in Russia but connect with a smuggler and maybe someone that pays fees to an armed group that operates, let's say, in Reynosa or in the state of Sonora, something like that. So all this information is included in the cases, and we are is U.S.-bound migration from all over the world. So the actors or the entities that we're analyzing are from everywhere in the world. It's U.S.-bound migration. So it's like that idea, right? And everybody from different parts of the world, and then to arrive to the United States. And they make use of actors that are transnational in nature, and sometimes they have their bases of operation outside Mexico, outside Central America, and they operate in Panama, and they are connected with so-called smugglers or part of the networks that have the basis of operation in Mexico. But it's kind of like that type of information is frequently incorporated into the description of the legal cases that we're analyzing.
So I can add a couple of points. Actually, one of the feedback that I wanted to solicit from the DHS stakeholders is whether you guys are also interested in specific networks which may intersect with human smuggling. So that will help us on one side analyze the results networks, focus on which aspect we should actually go in depth in mining, and also can help us retrieve the related documents. So, for example, we did some preliminary analysis, and we found two groups. One group was a trafficking ring. It was called the Eagle trafficking ring, and the other was a pill mill community. So the pill mill group was actually a group led by a specific person that he actually ran a pain clinic, but it was also the person behind the pill mill. And now this was very interesting because this community intersected with the trafficking ring, because part of the mill community was a person that was smuggled into the United States from the Bahamas in this case. So so we can go two ways. We can wait and see what the data tell us, right? But we can also listen to you guys if you guys have specific interest in investigating specific illegal or illicit networks that may have intersecting elements with human trafficking. Then we can try to focus our investigation. So that could also go both ways and can be very interesting. Also, obviously, we cannot analyze in one group the entire span of documents we may have access of. So our plan is to actually design an experiment where we can partition temporally the documents, also align these partitions with our knowledge of when the immigration policies changed, right? So that we can actually test hypotheses that these networks adapt to changes in policies.
Right.
So we can actually create temporal snapshots of these networks, and that will enable us to analyze their temporal dynamics and model that temporal dynamics. For example, we could see that certain rings or groups grew and potentially merged or split, or some groups dies over time, events of this kind. but we can structure specific experiments to actually analyze specific networks, how to evolve over time, and how do they align with the US policies and their changes over time. I don't know if I made sense, but it was clear.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. No, I think that makes sense. I guess the other question I had was, it sounds like the major source of information is public law cases. Now, I guess, like, what are your thoughts on whether that source of information will give you like a complete understanding of like some of these groups? I don't know that much about public law cases, but it sounds like these are people who have been arrested. So what about all the people who haven't been arrested? Presumably those are the people who maybe matter.
Yeah, so that was also one of our concerns. Now, we have started a little bit of explorations, both manual and automated. It's interesting because the problem is that there is a lot of variance across these legal cases. Some are very detailed. They contains information about fees being paid, where those migrants were kept, stash houses, the points where they cross the border. So there is very interesting information that can be helpful. We did run some initial experiments on generating the graphs on, the PhD students can help me here, but maybe 40, 60 documents. And we can see a lot of structures in this text, in this graph. There are groups and we can see connections among groups. So there is hope. The challenge will be that certainly there is a lot of variance across these cases. Some cases are not necessarily very detailed. So there will be missing information. The graph might be incomplete. There is things we can do on top of it, right? We can do link predictions, we can do some interesting analysis, but definitely they will contain useful information. That's the sense I have as with the preliminary explorations.
And I should say a word or two, James, just as a reminder, the cooperative agreement doesn't allow any data sharing between DHS components and the researchers. There is a real concern to make certain there's no confusion in the minds of the public or of Congress that researchers are somehow engaged in operational law enforcement activity. So that's a real concern. And the terms and conditions of the cooperative agreement in terms of the kind of data that can be used have become more restrictive over time. And the latest terms and conditions place really steep restrictions on using social media data. So, there was interest, there's interest in these kinds of projects and in going to social media sites and collecting data. But as I understand it, DHS has a twofold concern about social media data. One is that the privacy status of posts by individuals, and the other is the terms and conditions and the legal rights of the platforms that host social media. And so those conditions make it impractical to use social media in the way that 5 years ago we might have. And so using public law data is I think a really interesting and useful proxy. But with so many of our projects, what we are developing are techniques rather than operational data. And so it is very unlikely that the outcomes of this project will lead to any operational benefit. The idea would be to transition the techniques and eventually to use operational data or intelligence, but that would have to happen within DHS. That makes sense?
Okay, yep, no, got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So
so that's why we want to work so closely with you.
Question I have is about getting getting like migration trends from, I guess, like information about like entities and networks and things like that. Like, how do you plan on doing that? Just wondering.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, for example, so migration trends. So it can be within a snapshot, right? So we can actually ask. We can put. So we may get a very complex network, but we can also thinking of slicing this network across different dimensions. Okay, so we can actually, so we can have a complex networks with groups, various actors, smugglers, people being smuggled, and undocumented people, and so on and so forth. And we can have place of origin and place of destinations. So we can actually tune the system to look for specific informations. So if you are interested in investigating the dynamic with respect to where the people come from, the borders they cross, and where they're heading as groups, we can think of slicing and focusing on that specific dimensions, and that will enable us to, on one side, really to visualize the trend. Okay, and then if we are interested in seeing how these trends changed over time, you can think of having different snapshots, right? And each snapshot is a graph, and we can do community detections in each graph and see how they change and evolve over time, and that may also include their movements, right? We can have various features associated with them, and so in this way you can actually capture trends. And with trends, if you model those trends, you can have also a way of predicting where the trend is going, potentially. And if you apply this to history, right, you can also detect changes in trends when your model that is not predicting anymore well what's happening. So then it means that there is a change, and then the question is that what's changing, right, and why it is changing, and perhaps that's in response to change in I don't know, in the US policies and immigration policies. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Okay, thank you. Maybe the last question. Sorry, I'm asking so many questions.
That's very good.
Is, do you think that the techniques that you'll develop will be applicable to, I guess, like a lot of different types of sources? Like, it looks like you're just using like one type of source right now, but in the future, like if you transition over to us, like use like law cases, maybe like, I don't know, like I don't know, we probably won't be able to use social media either, but like different media sources, maybe some intelligence sources or whatever. Do you think that it'll be, we'll be able to use it if we have lots of like different types of sources?
Yes. So the brief answer is yes. So if this, and easily the transition can happen if the sources are all text, are in text form, right? Textual data that is right. It can easily be extended to media, right? Media sources, newspapers, and so on and so forth. Potentially, one could also thinking of multimodal data, videos, right? Videos can be also transcribed, so it can become text, or images in general, right? Perhaps for extraction of locations from images. So there are also multimodal, large multimodal data model that would enable different modalities in the input, including videos, images, text. Yeah, so there is definitely potential to extend to other textual data and multimodality data.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions. I can stop
Thank you.
monopolizing the time now. Thank you.
James, this is your time. You're welcome to ask as many questions as you want. The whole point is to make sure that we're on the same page with potential users in DHS. Any other questions? Carlotta, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the project? Anything you'd like to wrap up with?
I think I'm good. I think we discussed sort of the feedback. And yeah, those were very useful questions and feedback. So I would like to thank you all, and we are also very excited about this project. So
great. Well, the team is going to get started. In the meantime, Elizabeth will be point of contact both for the team as the program project manager, but also help to coordinate with some of the stakeholders on this call and other stakeholders as we add them. We can get you as involved as you'd like to be, including bespoke briefings to talk about particular milestones or to bring up any new information or concerns you have along the way. This is, of course, a one-year project subject to renewal for satisfactory performance. So it's hopefully a 2-year endeavor. And so we have plenty of opportunities to exchange and to course correct as necessary. So thank you very much for participating in this first step.
thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Goodbye now.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.